Hello friends, so in this video I'm going to show you how to build an application for mail merge. Okay, so this is about this tiny project here. So our target is basically to send an email with some data in your Google Spreadsheet, and we're going to use a Gmail draft as a template. So basically you can design your template with a Gmail draft. So in this draft, you can place some placeholders for text or link or image. Okay, so we need to design this template here. And we also can have multiple templates. Okay, so basically you can select different templates for different maybe different placeholders for different for template. Basically you can have an invoice template or something else. Okay, so that's my idea for now, and the data are going to be entered in a Google spreadsheet. Okay, and we can select the template with a drop down, and we're going to enter the placeholders in the spreadsheet data. Okay, so this is about this project, and let's get started to work on this project. And you can follow this video, and step by step I'm going to build this project line by line. Okay, so let's get started. All right, here I'm in this folder. Is an empty folder just with a presentation for me to explain this project to you. Okay, so first let's create a Gmail's draft file. Okay, basically we're going to create a draft here in your draft Gmail draft folder, and then let's add a new one here. Compose a new message, and then let's give it a subject like invoice. So maybe this is maybe you can call it invoice template, something like this. Okay, invoice template, and here you can design your template here. All right, so maybe say dear, and you can add maybe your client name. So I just put a name here, and here is your maybe invoice, and you can put a number here maybe for your invoice number. Okay, so this is a placeholder. They are in the double curly braces here, so they are placeholders. We're going to replace them later, and then you can style your template here. Maybe you can make it bold for this invoice number, and maybe give it a color, something like that. So make it blue, all right? Okay, not the background color. So make the font color blue, and background color, not underline. Background, let's say font color to blue. Okay, so this is for text placeholder, and we can have a link here, maybe for your website or something else like that. We visit my YouTube channel. Okay, I can give it remove the underline, and let's give it a color of gray. YouTube channel, and here I can pass a link. As you can see here, I can insert a link, and here I can give it a placeholder called YouTube link. Okay, so after I insert that, as you can see here, this is the link. If you check right now, this link is a placeholder. Okay, so if you change, and this is a placeholder we're going to use, we're going to replace this YouTube link with the real link. Okay, so this is for the link, and I'm not going to do the image here, so let's just put an image here. So this is for the image. Right now we have the text placeholder for the name, okay, for the text, I'm sorry, and then we have a placeholder, as you can see, for the link, and this one is going to be used for image, all right? So, and you can add something else, maybe thanks, put my name here. All right, so basically you can design this template here as a draft. Okay, so right now the draft has been designed here, make it very simple. All right, so we can close this one. And go back to our project folder. Let's create a Google spreadsheet here. Let's create a blank Google spreadsheet, and then the script is going to be created in this file, okay? And all the data should be inputted in this file. And we can, maybe we can give it a name for this tab. Let's say invoice. Maybe this is all data for the invoices, okay? And you can have multiple tabs for different template. Okay, so let's try to change the name first. So live coding 006 and mail merge with a draft as template. Okay, basically is the project name here. And let's open this script editor. We're going to create a new project, script app project. Okay. So let's rename this project live coding 006. Okay, basically, I think we only need to, before we design our code, we need to enter some data, okay? We need to design our data format here, all right? So here, I'm going to do a drop-down select. So basically, you can select some template, okay? So I'm going to name this as template or draft. Let's name it draft. So it makes sense. I name it as draft. And here, I like to have a column. So a status column. So basically, if we have a row here, we're going to have a status for this row. Okay. Basically, this row we're going to be an email. We're going to be merged. All right. And I'm going to have a status, and I'm going to have a thread column. So basically, every email we send, we're going to have a thread ID. The ID we are going to be recorded here later after we send the email. All right, and we also can give it a time stamp here after we send the email. Okay, so this is basically a tracking information for the email we are going to send. Okay, and let's add some other properties for the email. So for an email, we're going to have a subject, of course, and we're going to have a CC. Now CC is a to, basically is a receipt, and I'm going to have a CC and BCC, and another optional column is going to be attachment. All right, so this is going to be basically the must-have columns we're going to use. Okay, for every email we're going to send, we're going to have all of this information. We need to select a draft template. We're going to have a subject. I'm going to have a to. I'm going to, these are optional. All right, so after this attachment, you need to define your placeholders, like the name. If we have a name in this, basically this will going to be different for each template. If you have a name in your placeholder, sorry, not in your placeholder, in your template, you will have a name column, all right? And you have a number, that's for invoice, right? And you have What is that? We have a YouTube link. So if you check, we have a YouTube link. But why it is like this? I think I have a YouTube link. Okay. I have a YouTube link and I have an image. Okay, let's add it here. So YouTube, and we'll have an image. So basically, the columns after the attachment were going to be the placeholders. They are not constant. Okay, they're going to be different. Basically, different template may have different placeholders. Okay, so you need to define them by yourself. Okay, so in this example, I'm only defined 4 placeholders. All right, so this is the template, and we can start working with the code right now. So let's go back to this template here, to this project here. So first, I'd like to write some comment here to do a list and a list of functions we're going to create to do this project. All right. So first of all, we're going to have a main function, which is called, I'm going to call it run. So basically, this function is going to run this main application to check the rows here in this active tab, and to check them row by row. Okay, so if the status of this row is not sent, we're going to send this email. Okay, so this is our main function. So basically, this function we're going to do. So basically, it's check active. So check active sheet and send emails with row data. So this is the function we're going to create, the main function here, right? This run function. And we also can create another function to create the menu. So the function is called onOpen. So maybe we can do it later. So it's not a big deal. And let's make a const here called app name. So we can give it a name for this application. So let's call it LC006. So you can pick another name for this application. Okay, so this is the main function here. And another thing, we'd like to create a class. So this class, I'd like to call it app. The name is not a big deal, right? So basically, this is the application, and all the functions we're going to build, we're going to put all the functions in this app. And let's put the function here called run. So this is the main function here I'm going to call in this app. Okay. And let's get a comment here to be done. And let's call it here. Let's just call new app.run. Okay. So we can work on this class. So basically, we need to do something here. So for each row of data, we have a template here, right? So this status may be empty, status empty for the email which is not sent, thread is empty, timestamp is empty. So we have a subject here, maybe like LC006 demo. So this is subject, and this is the email address. Let's put my email here. For the CC, it's optional. BCC is also optional. Attachment optional. So name, let's put my name here, and the invoice number. Let's say invoice number 0001. YouTube link. Let's put my YouTube link here. YouTube. You don't need to add a HTTPS at the beginning, because if you check your template, okay, So because we already have a HTTP column // here, so we don't need to add a, but we can handle this in the script. It's not a big deal. For the image, right now I just place image here, text here, because I'm going to handle this later. Okay, we can put a URL here or ID of the image on your Google Drive. Okay, so this is the data. We need to grab all of this information from this spreadsheet. Okay, so first of all, let's just try to create some functions to collect the data. So let's create a function. So here, let's set up some default values in this constructor function. So here I'm going to take a name for app name, and I'm going to set the app name for this application, so which is name to name. And let's set the spreadsheet to the spreadsheet.getActive, because we're going to use this a lot, so that's why I added it here in this constructor function. So because we may have multiple tabs here, right? So for every tab, maybe a different template can be used. Okay, so I'd like to build a function to create this template. Basically, we're going to create this, generate all of these headers by default. Okay, so to do that function, let's create a function. Create template. And this we're going to take a name for this template. All right, we need to have a name. So this is name. Maybe you need to create an invoice template. I'm going to have an invoice. We're going to pass this invoice here. So let's try to create a new file, not new file, new tab here. So let's say const worksheet equal to this dot spread this dot ss dot get sheet by name. So if the name is already exist, so if there is already a worksheet, we're going to return this worksheet, right? Else, if there is this worksheet is not found, we're going to create a new one. So worksheet dot create, sorry, not this one. So this dot insert. So let's give it a name with this name, right? Actually, if it is there, I'm going to return. If it's not there, we're going to insert a new one. So let's const new, let's say template equal to this. And finally, I'm going to return template, right? And I'd like to put some default values to add these default headers to this template. How can we do that? So let's create a new function here to update template. And this function I'm going to take worksheet as a parameter. Let's say add parameters. So this is going to spread worksheet the worksheet or the Google Sheet object. So this we're going to take spreadsheet app sheet. So this is a type. Okay, this is type of this variable, not a variable, parameter. Okay. So this we're going to update, and I'm going to not return void, because I'm going to not return anything here for this function. This function is going to add the header. Okay, So basically add the default header. So this is going to add as default headers, and I'd like to define the headers here. So headers. So this header is going to be like this. It's going to be an array, and we have the draft, right? And we have the next one. What is that? Status. And we have thread, and then we have a time stamp. Next one, subject, and 2, and CC, BCC, and attachment. All right. So for the rest of them, let's place a default placeholders here. Placeholder 1. Let's add 3 placeholders. 2, 3. Okay, so basically this is the default headers for the for your template. All right, so let's add it here. These are headers. Go to headers. Actually, let me get rid of this name here. I can just use the names here. Okay. So this is the headers. So this update, we're going to update the header. So we should get a range. So the range, we're going to start from the row 1, column 1, and the number of rows is going to be 1 row, and number of columns is going to be the headers, or this dot headers dot length. This is the numbers of columns, okay? And I'm going to set values. I'm going to set the headers or this dot headers. So this is going to set up the header for this template worksheet, okay? So this is the first step, and I'd like to add a drop down here, okay, in the first column. Here we're going to set, you have options to select the draft, okay? And we should get a range because we start from A2, right? So from A2, basically start from A2 to the rest of the rows. I'm going to set a data validation. I'm going to set data validation. So here I'm going to have a template validation, which is not created yet. So const template data validation. Here I'm going to use another function which is not yet created. Let's say create template, create a draft. Let's call it draft validation. So basically this is going to be a list of available drafts. Create draft validation, and let's call it draft validation. And this function is not yet created. So let's do this function here. Create draft validation. So what this function going to do? Going to grab all drafts from your Gmail and create a data validation. All right. So first of all, we need to get all the drafts. So to do that, let's const drafts equal to gmail.get drafts. Okay, this we're going to get all the drafts, but we only need to get the the subject and the draft ID. Okay, so let's do something like this. Let's loop through this array. So here we'll have our draft. Okay, we loop through each draft here, and I'm going to return an object. Here I'm going to have an ID. Actually, I'm not going to return object, just return text. So let's say const ID will going to be draft get ID, and the subject going to be draft get message get subject, and the return subject at first and ID at last. And here I'd like to have a separator or delimiter here. Okay, so I'd like to define it here. So this draft ID separator, let's use this, maybe, okay, just use this as a separator, and this dot draft ID separator, basically going to separate the subject and ID with this separator. Okay, so this is our draft, and actually don't need this constant, just write this is a draft, and let's create the data validation. So let's return Spreadsheet.new data validation. Okay, so this is going to build a new data validation object, and we can use a list, required value in the list. So the list we're going to be array of values. Okay, so values in string. So the values are going to be this draft, right? So set allow invalid. I would like to set this allow invalid values to false. Okay, by default, I think the default value for the new data validation is true. So if you set it to true, that means you can enter invalid values there. So let's set it to false. And finally, let's build this data validation object and return this as a data validation. So we have this function to create, and let's add returns here. So this is going to spread dot data validation. So this is a type going to return the what is that? The draft data validation. Okay, so this is about this function, and here, so basically after we update our headers for this template, we'd like to set up the draft validations for the column A. Okay, so basically this is a column A. So update template. So after we did this, I think our template, we're going to update it. And here, if this worksheet is found, we're also going to call a function here. So let's do, because I'd like to update the validation. So let's say update. Actually, return is fine because this is already found. We found this spreadsheet, so just return this worksheet is fine. And if this is new, that means we insert a new template here, and let's call this update template, and we just pass this template. And this is going to update the template, add a header, and set the drafted data validation for this template, and finally return this template. Okay, so let's try to create a function here. So this is going to create a template, and For this name, I'd like to use an input to collect the name. Okay, so let's say const name equal to, let's say input equal to this dot. I think I need to grab the UI. Spreadsheet will get active, not get active. Get a UI. So UI dot prompt. UI dot button set. OK cancel. We are using OK cancel, and we'd like to add a title for this. So title, prompt, and button. So the title will going to be. So let's put the app name here, and let's say this is for the template name, right? Or we can just get rid of it. And here is a message. Please enter the template name here. So let's put it here as input or name input. Let's get rid of this name. So, and if, so we're going to check the button, okay? If this button equal to UI dot button dot OK. So basically here we're going to have a OK button and a cancel button. So if you click on this cancel button, we're going to cancel this action, okay? Only if the user click on this OK button, then we're going to keep on going on this other code here after this line of code. So if this is not equal to OK, then I'm going to return. So basically going to exit this function. Else, we're going to create, we're going to check if this worksheet is created or not, okay? And then we can grab the name and const the name going to be name input. Let's get the response text and trim the text just in case you put some space at the beginning or at the end of this name. So here we grab the name from the users, okay? And here maybe we can alert the user, maybe UI dot alert. Let's say app name here, and let's say warning. Give it a message of name. We already have a sheet with name. Pick another one. Just a message to the end users, and for the buttons, let's say OK. So basically, if we already have a worksheet with the name you entered, we're going to return alert to the end user. All right, so let's get rid of this and make this as a single line. So if not, we're going to create a new template and return this template. Maybe a template dot activated, and finally let's also send a message to the end user. And I think we don't need to return anything here. Let's say alert, let's say success, and say the new template has been created. So let's try to test this create template function here, right? So let's build a function here to create template. Function create template. So this function is going to be new app create template, and let's build the menu here. Function on open. So I'm going to add 2 buttons to this menu. Okay, so spreadsheet.get UI, and I'm going to create a menu with the name of this app name. So here I'm going to add item function. The first function is going to be mail merge, and the function name is run, and another one is going to be create template, and this function we're going to be this function create template, and finally let's add them to the UI. Okay, so this function is going to create a menu. So let's try to run this on open function to create the menu. The first time, so we're going to do this authorization process. All right, let's do it. Okay, so it's done, and it's created. I think I should have the menu here. So now I can run this function here. Let's say I'd like to create a template here. So please enter the template name here. So let's say invoice. What else would we like to do? Maybe alert. Maybe you'd like to send some alert message. Okay, so let's say okay. So right now the template has been created, and this is the alert function here. And as you can see here, I have a drop down here. I can choose a template I can use. So basically this is from the draft, okay, because I have only one draft here, and if I have multiple drafts here, I can have a list of drafts or a list of template here I can choose from. So basically which draft I should use for this mail merge, I can pick it here. Okay, so maybe as you can see here, here we don't have any drop down here, so I don't want to do it manually. So I'd like to have a function here to update the draft, just in case you add a new one or delete some draft here, and then we can update this drop down list. Okay, how can we do that? All right, we can create a function to update the validations. So let's say this function is going to update draft validations. So first of all, we'd like to get the draft validations, right? So const validation is going to be this dot create data draft validation. So we already have this function. Okay, I cannot use this one. Okay, not this one. Const draft validation. So this is our validation. So I'd like to go through all of these tabs. Maybe you have a multiple one, so we'd like to update all of them. All right. So let's do this dot get all the sheet. Okay, get all of them, and for each of them, so I'm going to check. I'm going to check if the A1 is draft, right? If the A1 is the draft, that means this is the template. Okay, so let's const A1 value equal to set.getRange A1 dot get display value. So going to get the display value if A1 is equal to this dot headers, the first one. You remember we have these headers, so the first one is the draft. Okay, so we're going to check if this is the if this current tab, current sheet is the valid, is the template. Okay, so if it is the template, I'm going to reset the draft validation. Okay, I'm going to do something like this. So sheet.getRange going to be A2 to A, and let's set the data validation, which is going to be the draft validations. This one. Okay, and I think this is going to do the update draft validation. And we can add another function here. Let's add a separator here. We create a template. Let's add a function here. Let's say update draft validation. And the function name is going to be, let's create a function here. Function update draft validation. So this function is in this class. So new app dot update draft validations. Let's add s here. So update draft validations. Okay, so let's try to run this function again. And I should have another function here. So update draft validations. And after I run this function, I should have this generated automatically. So let's just remove some rows here because I don't want to have so many rows here. And let's try to update the draft validation. I hope everything's fine now. And as you can see here, I have an error message because this template is not valid. Right, so now I can choose a invoice template, and here we have the ID of this draft ID, okay, for this draft. So basically this is ready. Basically this is just the utilities or helper function to handle this template, okay. And we are not yet actually we are not get the main part, so we're just doing some preparation for this project. Okay, so we have this template ready, and we can move on to the next part. So we have this template function, update draft validation function, and here we can move on to the next part. So this function you're going to check if this is the current worksheet is a template or not. Okay, so it looks like we have did this before. I think it did it in this function here to check. All right, so basically first step, if, so let's say const the worksheet is going to be get active. So first of all, so if we want to do a mail merge, we're going to reference to this active spreadsheet. Okay, so if you are on this invoice, I'm going to use this invoice tab. If this alert is active, I'm going to use this as a template. So this is a dynamic, and we need to check. So if worksheet get name, sorry, not get name. So let's do like we check the A1 value, right? Const A1 value equal to worksheet.getRange A1 get display value. So if A1 value is not equal to this dot headers dot, not dot, 0, this is the draft. If it's not, that means this tab is not valid. Maybe you are in this tab, this value is empty, right? This is not a valid template. So I'm going to return an alert. So let's get a reference to that UI. Const UI going to be spreadsheet.getActive, get UI. So let's turn UI.alert. For the title, let's add app name here, or this store name. And for the, let's give it a warning. This is not a valid template. Current sheet is not a valid template. Select another one. And the UI dot button set dot OK. So basically, let's make a new line here. So basically, if this is not a valid template, we're going to end the code here, right? So if this is a valid one, we need to go through this template line by line and check the status for this row. Okay. So if, not if. So const are going to have headers, not headers. Yes, the headers and values. This is going to be worksheet or get data range, get values. Okay, let me show you what I'm doing here. So let's just console log this header, headers, and these values. And let's try to run this function called run. Okay, so you see this is the header. So basically it's from this the row 1, okay, and the value is going to be row 2, and here this is a two-dimensional array because we may have multiple rows, okay, for these values, and we can have a reference to this value. Okay, and we're going to go through each of these values. So for each row, values, row values and index, and I'm going to do, we're going to send this email, okay? So I'm going to call a function called this.sendEmail, and with some data, we have the row values. So basically, this is the value of this row, and we're going to have an index. Basically, this is the row index, and we're going to have the headers. Okay, we are going to use the headers because we're going to need to have a reference to these placeholders and all of these subject to CC and BCC. Okay, so this send email function is not yet defined. Let's define this function. So let's call it send. Let's copy it just in case have some typo there. And we have a function called row values, okay? And we have an index here. That's row index start from 0. And we have headers. All right, so this function is going to send email. All right, and to send an email, we can call this function to send email, right? We have some receipt. If you check we have a receipt, subject and the body. So receipt, body, subject, and we have body, and we have some options. All right, so this is our, we need to grab the receipt, subject, body, and options from these row values. Okay, so these row values is these values, right? We can get the subject to CC and BCC. All of this information we can get from. So let's create a function to handle all of this information. So function, maybe let me think a little bit. Basically, here we have two parts. So the first part is about this all of this constant information is about this email, and we have some dynamic data, okay, for the placeholders, okay. So basically, and we also need to get the invoice, sorry, not the invoice, the draft ID here, because we need to use this ID to get the HTML content, HTML body from this draft, all right. So basically 3 tasks. So first, let's get draft HTML body. So this is the first part, and we need to get the email data and get placeholders data. All right. So to do that, we can split all of this in separate functions. So to do that, so first let's get the draft HTML body. So let's create a function to do that. Get draft HTML body. So let's only put an ID for this draft. So this is going to be the ID or draft ID. And here, if you remember the draft, okay, so let's get the draft ID, const draft ID. The draft ID we're going to be row values. This is the first one, right? And I'm going to split it with this dot. If you remember, we have a draft ID separator, right, which is defined here, and split it. Where is my function? And I'm going to choose the second position, which is 1, okay. So this is draft ID, and const draft HTML body. I'm going to be this dot get draft HTML body with this draft ID. And here we can get the draft. Let's do a const draft equal to gmail app dot get draft by ID. Okay, let's say we have a draft ID here. Let's do, this is the draft. I'm going to return the draft to get message and get a body. Okay, this is going to return the HTML body for this draft. So this is the first part. And the second part, I'd like to get the email data. So let's say const, let's say, so for the email data, I'd like to get all of this information subject to this BCC, okay? So to do that, I can do it a very stupid way. So let's say we have an object called const options, all right? This is our options, and then we have a receipt. So this is going to be the row values. If you can count here, so this is the subject. For the receipt is this one, so it's counting 6, but we start from 0, so that's 5. So that's 5. And we have our subject. Subject cannot put here, sorry. So for this option part, I have CC and BCC and attachment here. I'm not going to do the attachment here right now because it's going to be, let's put it empty here. So for the CC, where is my CC is from the 6, which is 6. Okay, so CC in column 6, and here we have in column 7. And for the attachment, let's just put empty here because we're going to handle this attachment later. All right. So this is for the options. And for the placeholders, start from column J, right? So this is a little bit not very good. Okay, so this kind of code, let me try to write another function to do that. So let's do a function called handle row data. Handle row data. So basically have the row values and have the index, and don't need the index, and the headers. All right, I have the headers and the values. I'm going to const object equal to, not object, let's say data equal to an object, and I'm going to go through each header. All right, so I have a header and I have an index here for each header. So I'd like to loop through them, okay, one by one. And I can do something like this. Data, header, we're going to be the key for this property. And I can assign a value. The value we're going to be row values. And I have an index for this row value. Okay, so this is going to be the data object. All right. And you know what? I'd like to separate the project, the object in two parts. Okay. So if these headers, because we have these headers here, so I'd like to say, where is my function? Handle row data. Handle. So here I have a email data object and have a placeholders. So let's say if we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 elements in this header, okay? So let's say const email data keys. We're going to be this dot headers dot slice from 0 to 9, I think. I'm not sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, we only need 9 items from this header because the rest of them are placeholders, right? So this is the email data key. So let's try to do this again. So headers for each header and index. So if email data keys dot includes this header, we're going to use this. So this header and the value we're going to be row values, and this is the index going to get the value. Okay, so else if this key If this header is not in this email data key, that means there's a placeholder, okay? So placeholder and header row data. Let's copy this because they're the same. And finally, let's return email data and a placeholder. All right, so this function is going to handle the row data, going to separate them with email data and placeholder. So basically, this is, I think, is a better way to handle things like this. All right, so here before we get the draft ID, we can get the email data and placeholders. Let's call this function handle row data. Right, with these row values and headers. Okay, we get the email data and the placeholders from here. And for this draft ID, it's going to be a little bit different. So we don't have to use this row data here. We can use email data dot draft. Okay, so this draft is going to we can access things like this. So this is the draft ID we can get from this email data, and this placeholder we're going to use later. All right. So this is the draft HTML body we get from this draft, and we can build things like this. So for this one, we're going to have email data.cc. So this is a better way to do that, I think. And the email data, not cc. Here we're going to bcc. So for this attachment, we can handle it later. All right. So let's just put an empty array here for now. And I think I get the CC/BCC. And for this send email, so for this receipt, we can say email data dot to, and this is going to be email data dot subject. And for this body, let's use this draft. Okay, I need to update this body here. So let's const HTML body. We're going to be because we got this draft body here and like to update. So let's say we call function here this dot update HTML body, and I'm going to pass this body and the placeholders. We're going to use this placeholder to update this draft body here. Okay, and let's move this line above here. Let's also get this comment here. Okay, so get draft. And we can pass this HTML body here as advanced parameters here. All right. So this body, right now, we can put an empty string here. So this function is not yet created. Create update. Let's say update HTML body. We have a template body because it's from the draft. So this is draft HTML body. Or you can call it, because this is just a parameter, so you can call it HTML body. It's fine. And the placeholders. So here I'd like to update the placeholders here. So object entities. So for each we have a key value here in this entries, okay, and we can update this HTML body. So HTML body equal to HTML body dot replace. I'm going to replace a regular expression here, and I'm going to replace it with a value. And for this regular expression, we can build it with a new regular expression. And the text, the pattern, we're going to be the key, all right? And the modifier, we can add a G for global, If you add I here, that means I think it's case insensitive. So this is a regular expression going to replace this template, and finally going to return this HTML body. Okay, so this is going to replace this HTML body, and after we get this HTML body, we can send this email, all right? And for this body, we can also put the HTML body here. It's not a big deal because we have the HTML body, and this we can keep it here as empty string. And this we're going to send the email, all right? So maybe let me console log email data and console log the options and console log the placeholders here. So you will see some result here before we send the email. So we can click on this run function. Let's run this function. So for the first log is email data. So if you check the email data, this is not the first one, okay? I have other logs here because these headers. So let's get rid of this line. Headers, rows, try to run again. So as you can see, this is the email data from draft column to attachment column, right? And this is for the placeholders. I have all the placeholders. And this is the email, okay? This is the email body. So as you can see, this is already replaced. So if I send an email here, I should send this email. All right. So after we send this email, I'd like to get the emails which we send, okay? So let's try to do const send email equal to get this dot get sent email by subject. Let's just put this email data subject here. Sent email. So let's define this function here. Subject. So let's do a gmail.query, not query, search. Search something in send, and subject is equal to subject. Okay, let's get one item. Start from 0, get one item. And so this search function is going to return a list of Gmail thread, as you can see here. So let's return the first one. Okay, so this is function to get the sent email, and after we get this sent email, we can update the status and this thread ID and the timestamp. Okay, so to do that, we can do because we have an index here, right? You remember? So we can say this. I'm going to return. I'm going to return this send email. Okay, and I don't need this index because I'd like to update this here. So after we send this email, so let's say const send email equal to this send email. So after we got this send email, we can update. So this dot, sorry, not this dot, we can update the values. So where is the values? So let's say values. Remember we have an index here. So this is the index, and we have a reference to this. So this is the first column, this is 0. The status is going to be 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3. we're going to pick column index. So this is one is going to be the status. Let's say the status dot success, and let's make a copy of this for 2 times. This is second one, this third one. So get thread ID. I think this sent email. Okay, so this is going to return, it returns Gmail app dot Gmail thread. Okay, so this send email going to return a Gmail thread, and this send email going to get what? Get ID. Okay, so this is going to get the thread ID. Going to save this ID to this thread column. Okay, and for the last one, we're going to have a new date for the timestamp. Okay, so for the status, let's define the status here. Let's say we have success, which is equal to success, and actually alright, so this is a success, and failed is failed. Alright, so this is for the status. I'd like to change it to success. So for each row, and this, something is wrong. I don't want to reload and lose my, cannot be saved. Let's reload the page. Something is wrong. Okay. Oh my God. Okay, this looks fine. I hope my codes are not lost. Let's find the status dot success. Okay, we are here. So we save this kind of data. So after we did everything, we need to save this data to the spreadsheet. Okay, so how can we do that? We can do this dot, not this, worksheet dot get range. So we start from row 2, row 1, not row 1, row 2, okay? And column 1, rows were going to be values dot length, and the columns are going to be values 0 dot length, and we're going to set values. So this we're going to update the values, okay? So the values, because we update the information here. So let's try to do a test here. I hope everything can work fine. So let's just send headers for each is not function. Headers for each is not a function. Send email. Okay, here I don't need to pass this index here. So let's try to do it again. Set value is not defined. Get range. Okay, this is a dot. Set values. I think the email has been sent successfully. So if you check my inbox here, refresh. Yes, as you can see, I have this message which have been updated successfully. But this here is not updated because we just have error here to save the data. So let's try to send it again. As you can see here, success. So this is the thread ID. and this is the timestamp. So that means this message have been sent successfully. All right, so I will stop here because this is kind of maybe I need to do a next part if you are interested, because there is something is not completed yet, and I don't want to make this video very long. Okay, so I will make it as a part A, and maybe later I could do a part B, so you can follow this channel. All right, and for the part which is not completed, and think I need to handle some attachment, and we're going to handle some image. Okay, just in case you have some image to be inserted, like here. So right now this image placeholder is just text. Okay, it's placed with text, and I think this link is working. It's going to bring me to this to my YouTube. Okay, and so I just stop here, and I'm going to prepare the second part for this video. Okay, it's a long video, I have to say. So see you in next part. Bye bye.